Nolan wiped the sweat from his brow as he walked along the rocky edge of the volcanic cliffs. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground trembled slightly with distant eruptions. Most humans avoided this place. It was dangerous, and the aliens who ruled the colony made it clear that humans were only allowed in certain areas. But Nolan, a nurse in the Royal Medical Facility, had heard strange cries from the cliffs. His heart had made him come. As he stepped closer, he saw it, a tiny dragon hatchling shivering and barely alive. Its scales were dull and its small wings twitched weakly. Nolan's chest tightened. Dragons were sacred here. Humans were not allowed to touch them. Even approaching one without permission could mean imprisonment, or worse. But looking at the hatchling, Nolan could not turn away. The hatchling's eyes, bright and golden, met his. There was a soft, almost human sound, a whimper that tugged at Nolan's heart. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, crouching carefully. He knew one wrong move could make the hatchling panic. He wrapped his hands around its small, fragile body, feeling its rapid heartbeat. For a moment he froze, listening. The cliffs were silent except for the soft hiss of distant lava and the wind whistling through jagged rocks. No one saw him. No one could stop him. Nolan knew he had only a little time. He carried the hatchling down the steep rocks slowly, careful not to slip. Every step was tense and he could feel the weight of what he was doing pressing on him. Saving a dragon was not just dangerous, it was forbidden. Humans were only allowed to treat injured aliens or their own kind. Dragons were considered sacred, untouchable. A human could be punished for life if caught interfering. But Nolan did not think of the punishment. He thought of the small life in his hands. Its tiny claws dug slightly into his shirt as it whimpered again, weakly. "I won't let anything happen to you," Nolan said. He had to believe that. When he finally reached a small cave near the edge of the colony, he set the hatchling down on soft moss he had gathered. It curled slightly, too weak to move much. Nolan checked its breathing and body, gently wiping dirt from its scales. He had seen dragons in the hospital before, huge and terrifying. But this one was different. It was small, helpless, and dependent on him. He realized he needed food. Carefully, he searched the nearby area and found some alien fruits that were safe for small creatures. The hatchling nibbled weakly and Nolan smiled. "There you go. You'll get stronger soon." Hours passed and the sun dipped low. Nolan knew he couldn't stay long. Humans were not allowed here after dark, and the patrols would come looking. But he also could not leave the hatchling alone. He built a small shelter with rocks and moss and whispered to it softly, telling it stories of courage and hope. The hatchling listened, its golden eyes blinking slowly. That night, Nolan sneaked back to the human quarters in the colony. He could not tell anyone what he had done. Even his closest friends would report him if they knew. Humans here had learned to obey, to stay invisible in a world dominated by aliens. But Nolan was different. Compassion had always driven him. And tonight he had acted on it. As he lay in his small room, sleep eluded him. He imagined the hatchling shivering in the cave, wondering if it would survive. His heart ached. He thought of the dragons he had treated before, the pride in their golden eyes, the power they held. And he wondered, what if this small one grew? Could it remember him? Could it survive without him? The next morning, Nolan returned to the cave. The hatchling was slightly stronger. Its scales glimmered faintly in the morning light, and it nuzzled his hand weakly. Nolan smiled and gently stroked its head. He had no idea what the consequences would be if anyone discovered him. He only knew one thing: he could not abandon it. He spent the day gathering more food and water, carefully keeping the hatchling hidden. He named it Ember, after the faint glow of its scales in the dark cave. Ember responded to him, making soft chirping sounds whenever he approached. Nolan felt a strange bond forming, stronger than anything he had experienced before. As evening fell again, Nolan realized something. He was no longer just a nurse. He was a protector. And in that moment he knew he would face any danger, endure any punishment just to keep Ember alive. Little did he know, eyes had been watching him from afar. The aliens who patrolled the cliffs had noticed movement. A human should never have been there. And someone would soon report what he had done. Nolan's heart skipped a beat, but he held Ember close, whispering, "Don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you. Not now, not ever." For the first time, the tiny hatchling made a sound that was almost like a laugh. Nolan smiled, not knowing that this simple act of mercy would soon change everything in ways he could never imagine. The next morning, Nolan returned to the cave, carrying food and water for Ember. The hatchling was stronger now. Its tiny wings fluttered as it nuzzled his hand. Nolan smiled, feeling a warm pride in his chest. He had done the right thing. But even as he fed Ember, a cold dread crept into his mind. Humans were not supposed to touch dragons. Someone could see him. Someone could report him. He had just set down a bowl of water when he heard the faint sound of footsteps on the rocks. Nolan froze. He crouched over Ember, shielding the hatchling with his body. Shadows moved along the edge of the cliff. His heart pounded. Patrol drones hovered silently above, scanning the area. One of them paused, hovering directly over the cave. Nolan's stomach twisted. A metallic voice crackled from the drone's speaker. Human detected near dragon territory. Identify yourself. Nolan swallowed hard. It's just me, he whispered. I'm a nurse. I mean no harm. The drone's sensors focused on him, scanning his movements. Nolan held his breath. Ember let out a tiny squeak, curling closer to him. Suddenly the drone emitted a loud alarm. Violation. Human interference with sacred dragon property. Report to colony authorities immediately. Before Nolan could react, another drone appeared and soon figures emerged from the shadows, tall, imposing aliens wearing ceremonial robes. They surrounded him, their eyes glowing faintly with authority. Nolan stood slowly, raising his hands in surrender. He couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. One of the aliens, the tallest and most severe-looking, stepped forward. Human, it said, voice deep and commanding. Do you know what you have done? Nolan shook his head. I only wanted to help. The hatchling was dying. I couldn't leave it. The alien's eyes narrowed. Compassion is not your right. Dragons are sacred. Your interference could bring dishonor to the colony. Nolan felt a pang of fear, but he held his ground. I couldn't just let it die, he said quietly. I'm a nurse. Saving life is what I do. Another alien, smaller but no less intimidating, stepped forward, holding a glowing tablet. It showed a live feed from the drones. Nolan saw himself holding Ember, feeding it, protecting it. His heart sank. The evidence was clear. There was no denying it. The tall alien shook its head slowly. You have broken the law, it said. By touching a dragon you have committed a grave offense. You will be brought before the council for judgment. Nolan's stomach dropped. He had known this could happen, but now it was real. Please, he said, desperation in his voice. I only saved a life. I didn't mean to break any law. The aliens were unmoved. They surrounded him, their grip firm but not cruel. Nolan picked up Ember carefully, wrapping the hatchling in his jacket to protect it. He would not leave it behind. Not now. Not ever. As they led him to the council chambers, the colony seemed eerily quiet. Other humans scurried away and alien citizens paused to watch. Whispers filled the corridors. Everyone had heard about the human who dared to touch a dragon. Nolan felt every eye on him, weighing him, judging him. But he refused to look down. He held Ember close and the hatchling nuzzled his neck. The council chamber was enormous, its walls glowing with soft light, engraved with ancient symbols of dragons. At the center, a semicircular table held the council members, aliens of every size and shape, their eyes fixed on Nolan. The air was tense, heavy with judgment. The tallest alien, the one who had first confronted him, spoke again. Human, you stand accused of violating the sacred laws of this colony. You have touched a dragon, a creature of power and honor. What do you have to say for yourself? Nolan swallowed hard. He looked at each member of the council. I only wanted to save it, he said. The hatchling was weak and dying. I couldn't leave it. I couldn't just watch it die. I know the laws, but saving life is what humans do. It's who we are. A murmur went through the council. Some members leaned forward, frowning. Others looked away, silent. The tallest alien shook its head. You claim morality over law. But your compassion does not excuse your crime. You have endangered the colony's honor. A sentence must be delivered. Nolan's heart pounded in his chest. He had known this might happen, but the fear of what the council would decide was worse than any physical danger. He tightened his hold on Ember, who chirped softly, sensing his tension. The council deliberated in silence. Their glowing eyes shifted from Nolan to the feed showing Ember in his arms. Finally, the tallest alien spoke again. Human, your actions cannot go unpunished. You will be confined until the Dragon King himself decides your fate. You are lucky that the hatchling survives. Others would not have been so merciful. Nolan nodded slowly, hiding the tremble in his hands. He had no choice but to obey. But even in this moment of fear, he felt a strange sense of resolve. He had done what he believed was right. He had saved a life. And somehow he knew that act of courage was only the beginning. As he was led away to a small dark holding cell, he whispered to Ember, Don't worry. I'll protect you. No matter what happens, I won't leave you. The hatchling chirped in response, curling closer to him. Outside the chamber, the sky darkened suddenly. A low rumble shook the cliffs. Nolan did not know it yet, but far above the colony, dragons had already noticed the human who had shown mercy. And their response would come faster than anyone expected. The cell was small and dark. Nolan pressed his back against the cold stone wall, holding Ember close. The hatchling's warmth comforted him, but fear and tension wrapped around his heart like a heavy chain. The council had pronounced his confinement, and he had no idea what would happen next. The Dragon King had not been consulted yet. That thought both worried and gave him hope. He checked Ember. The hatchling's breathing was steady, and its tiny claws clung gently to his shirt. "It's okay," Nolan whispered. "We'll get through this. I promise." Ember chirped softly, a sound that made Nolan's chest tighten. Even in the darkness, even in this cell, he could feel a bond forming between them. A bond that went beyond fear or rules. The hours crawled by. Outside the cell, shadows moved as alien guards patrolled the corridors. The distant rumble of volcanic eruptions shook the walls. Every sound made Nolan flinch. Every footstep of the guards reminded him that the law was waiting to crush him if he made a single mistake. But he would not leave Ember. Not now, not ever. Nolan could not sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of what might happen. Would the Dragon King spare him? Or would the council decide he had gone too far? He thought of humans he had known, the nurses and doctors who always chose life over rules, no matter the cost. That was humanity, he realized. Courage, compassion, and stubbornness. Humans did not give up on those who needed help. And he would not give up on Ember. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it strange noises from the cliffs. It sounded like roars, but distant, almost musical. Nolan's heart skipped. Could it be? Were other dragons nearby? He pressed Ember closer, whispering soothing words. The hatchling twitched and chirped, sensing his unease. Hours passed like this, slow and heavy. Nolan finally dared to peek through the small window of the cell. The sky was dark, lit only by the red glow of the volcanic lava and distant lightning. Nothing moved. Yet the feeling of being watched remained. He shivered, but it was not from cold. Something was coming, he could feel it. He looked at Ember. The hatchling's eyes reflected the faint red light, glowing like little sparks of fire. Nolan smiled despite his fear. "You're stronger than you look," he said softly. "And we're going to get through this together." Ember chirped again, a tiny sound, but it made Nolan's chest swell with hope. Suddenly, a loud metallic clanging echoed through the cell corridor. Guards were moving quickly. Nolan's pulse quickened. They must be bringing food or checking on prisoners, he thought. But then came the sound of wings, large heavy wings beating the air. Nolan froze. He could hear the rush of wind, the distant roar that made the ground tremble. Ember twitched violently, ears perked. Nolan whispered, "Shua, it's okay. It's okay, Ember." But even as he spoke, he felt a strange energy in the air. Something was coming. Something powerful. The wing beats grew louder. The ground shook with each beat. The distant roar became clearer, more defined, echoing across the cliffs and through the colony. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. He had seen dragons before, but never like this. Never so many. Never so close. And somehow he knew they had come because of him. Because of Ember. He pressed the hatchling against his chest. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We don't know what's happening yet. Just stay with me." Ember chirped softly, calming a little as Nolan stroked its head. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time seemed meaningless in the cell. Then a sudden vibration ran through the stone walls, louder than before. Nolan held Ember tightly. The vibration turned into a low, deep roar, echoing through the corridors, shaking the doors of the council chambers. Guards shouted, running in panic. Alien citizens began to scream and scatter. Nolan's heart raced. He had never heard anything like this. His fear mixed with awe. Dragons were coming. The hatchling he had saved, Ember, was not alone. And somehow Nolan knew, the dragons had come because someone or something recognized his act of mercy. The sounds grew louder, closer, unstoppable. The city shook with the power of hundreds of dragons moving as one, their wings like storms. The wind tore through the corridors, rattling doors, scattering papers, and hurling dust into the cell. Nolan held Ember, protecting it as best as he could. In that moment, fear turned into determination. Nolan whispered, "I saved you, Ember. I will protect you. No matter what happens, I won't let them hurt you. I won't let anyone." Ember chirped, as if understanding every word. Its tiny body trembled, but it pressed closer to him. The alien guards outside the cell scrambled to try and control the chaos, but their shouts were drowned out by the roar of dragons. Nolan could hear massive claws striking stone, scales scraping walls, and the low hum of dragon power vibrating through the air. For the first time, he realized that mercy, courage, and compassion were forces stronger than any law or punishment. And somewhere, far above, beyond the colony, the Dragon King watched. The smallest act of a human nurse, choosing life over rules, had reached even him. Nolan did not know it yet, but his choice tonight would change everything. He held Ember tightly, whispering softly in the darkness, "We're not alone, Ember. We're not alone." The hatchling chirped again, small but brave, and for the first time since his confinement began, Nolan felt hope, fierce and unstoppable, filling his heart. The night of reckoning had begun. Dawn broke over the colony, painting the volcanic cliffs in shades of red and gold. Nolan sat in his small dark cell holding Ember close. The night had been long and terrifying. The roars of dragons still echoed in his mind, and the ground trembled under the memory of their massive wings. He did not know what to expect, but a strange feeling told him that today would change everything. Outside the colony stirred. Alien citizens whispered nervously among themselves, peeking out from behind buildings. Guards rushed to secure the streets, their eyes scanning the skies. Something was coming, something that even the most powerful aliens could not control. Suddenly, a deep shadow passed over the cell. Nolan looked up through the small window. At first he could only see shapes, dark and immense. Then the sun glinted off scales that shimmered like molten metal. Dragons, hundreds of them, soared above the colony, their wings casting shadows that darkened the streets. Nolan's heart raced. He had never seen so many dragons in one place and never so close to the humans. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, with power, and, he realized, recognition. Recognition of him. Of Ember. The doors of his cell shook violently. Guards shouted, trying to hold their ground, but the dragon's presence was overwhelming. The hatchling in Nolan's arms chirped softly, as if sensing the arrival of its kin. Nolan tightened his hold, protecting Ember while his mind raced. The dragons landed in the central plaza of the colony. Each one was enormous, their claws tearing into stone and metal, yet they did not attack the humans. Instead, they formed a circle surrounding the council chambers. Nolan could see them clearly now, scales that shimmered like gold, silver, and crimson, eyes glowing with ancient intelligence. And then, in the center, a massive dragon descended. Its wings spread wide, black and gold, casting a shadow over the entire plaza. Its eyes, larger and brighter than any Nolan had seen, focused on him. Ember chirped excitedly, nuzzling Nolan's chest. The guards and council members fell silent. The alien leaders exchanged fearful glances. None of them had expected this. The Dragon King had arrived. The massive dragon lowered its head. Its voice, deep and commanding, filled the air. Though it spoke in the dragon tongue, Nolan understood, not with words but with meaning. The human who showed mercy to the young one stands before me. Nolan felt his knees go weak. He had expected punishment, imprisonment, maybe even exile. But this was something he had never imagined. The Dragon King looked at him with eyes that seemed to see into his very soul. Compassion. Courage. Humanity. The council members began to speak, trying to assert authority, but the Dragon King roared. The sound was deafening, shaking the stones and rattling the air. The aliens fell silent, trembling. The Dragon King's message was clear. The human was under his protection. Nolan stepped forward, holding Ember high. The hatchling chirped proudly, spreading its tiny wings. Nolan's heart swelled. He had done nothing but act with kindness, and now that simple act had brought him honor beyond any human law. The Dragon King circled above, landing lightly before Nolan. Its massive head lowered, and Ember chirped happily, recognizing its parent. Nolan felt a warmth spread through him. The hatchling had not only survived but had brought him into a bond that even the most powerful aliens could not break. One of the council members stepped forward, trembling. "Your Majesty, this human, he touched a sacred dragon." The Dragon King roared again, louder this time. "Sacred, yes. But mercy is stronger than law. Courage is stronger than fear. The human acted for life, and in doing so, he has earned respect." Nolan could hardly breathe. He glanced down at Ember, who chirped again, tiny wings flapping in excitement. The Dragon King nudged Ember gently, acknowledging the bond they shared. Then it looked at Nolan, eyes bright with approval. The humans and aliens in the plaza stared in awe. Some whispered, some bowed, but all understood. The balance of power had shifted. One human, one nurse, had stood for life and kindness. And the dragons had answered. Nolan realized something profound. Humanity was not weak. Humans were small, fragile, and often powerless in the eyes of the universe. But they had something else: compassion, courage, and the will to protect life even when the odds were against them. And now, for the first time, the dragons recognized that strength. The council members were quiet, defeated. Their condemnation had been meaningless. The Dragon King had declared Nolan protected. The human who had dared to save a dragon hatchling now stood as a hero, not just to humans, but to the most powerful beings in the colony. Nolan lowered Ember to the ground. The hatchling chirped and ran a few steps, looking back at him. Nolan smiled, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. He had faced judgment, fear, and uncertainty, and he had survived. Not just survived, but triumphed. The Dragon King spread its wings and roared once more, signaling to the other dragons. They took flight, circling the colony and filling the sky with their power and majesty. Nolan watched in awe, understanding that he was witnessing a moment that would be remembered for generations. He held Ember tightly again, whispering, "We did it, little one. We made it." Ember chirped, nuzzling him. For the first time, Nolan felt completely safe, completely proud, and completely human. The arrival had come. The dragons had come. And the world would never be the same again. The sky was alive with dragons. Hundreds of massive wings beat in unison, creating gusts that whipped through the streets of the colony. Nolan stood at the center of the plaza, holding Ember close, and watched as the dragons landed gracefully around him. The ground trembled beneath their weight, yet none showed aggression. Instead, they formed a protective circle, surrounding him as if he were one of their own. The aliens who had condemned him stood frozen, their faces pale with shock and fear. The council had been powerless in the presence of the Dragon King and its legion. Nolan realized then that true power did not always come from authority or weapons. It came from courage, mercy, and the willingness to do what was right. The Dragon King lowered its massive head, its golden eyes locking onto Nolan's. "Human," it said, voice deep and resonant, "you have shown mercy where others would have destroyed. You have acted for life, not law. You are under my protection." Nolan felt a mix of awe and relief. He had never imagined that a single act of kindness could carry such weight, could challenge centuries of law and fear. He looked down at Ember, who chirped softly, its tiny wings flapping in excitement. The hatchling had survived, and it had brought him into a bond stronger than any rule or command. The council members approached cautiously, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty," one began, voice trembling, "this human, he defied our laws. He touched the sacred dragon." The Dragon King roared, a sound that shook the air and made the buildings tremble. "Sacred, yes. But mercy is stronger than law. Courage is stronger than fear. The human acted for life, and in doing so, he has earned respect." Nolan straightened, standing tall despite his exhaustion. He felt a wave of pride and humility at the same time. Humans were small in the universe, fragile and limited compared to dragons and aliens, yet here he was, recognized by beings of immense power for doing what was right. It was proof that humanity's greatest strength was not size or technology, but heart. The aliens remained silent, realizing their judgments were meaningless. The laws they had relied on for generations were no match for the power of compassion. Nolan understood then that humanity's influence was subtle but profound. One act of courage could change the world. One human could shift the balance of an entire colony. Ember hopped from Nolan's arms, chirping joyfully. Nolan laughed softly, feeling a lightness he had not known in days. He knelt and stroked the hatchling's head. "We did it, little one," he whispered. "We survived and we made a difference." The Dragon King moved closer, nudging Ember gently. Nolan noticed the respect in the massive dragon's movements. It acknowledged the bond between him and the hatchling, and in doing so, it acknowledged the value of human compassion. Nolan felt warmth spread through him. This moment would be remembered, not because of laws or fear but because of humanity's heart. The colony slowly recovered from the shock. Aliens who had doubted humans' worth now looked at them with a new understanding. Whispers spread through the streets, humans were not weak. They could act with courage and mercy in ways even the mightiest dragons respected. Nolan returned to his quarters later, exhausted but filled with a deep sense of purpose. He had faced condemnation, fear, and the unknown, yet he had stood for life and compassion. Ember curled beside him, small but brave, and slept peacefully. Nolan smiled, knowing that the hatchling would grow strong under the watch of its kin and that humanity had earned a place in a world that once seemed indifferent to them. Days passed and the colony slowly adapted to the new reality. Humans were no longer ignored or underestimated. The dragons had made it clear that those who acted with courage and compassion were worthy of respect. Nolan became a symbol, not because he sought fame but because he acted rightly when it mattered most. He continued his work as a nurse, tending to humans, aliens and dragons alike. Every day he remembered the night he chose to save Ember despite the laws, despite the risk. Every day he remembered that humanity's greatest strength was the courage to protect life, no matter the cost. One evening, Nolan stood on the cliffs, looking out over the colony. Dragons flew above, their silhouettes glowing against the setting sun. Ember, now slightly larger and stronger, perched on his shoulder, chirping softly. Nolan felt a deep connection to the world around him. Humanity had proven itself, not with weapons, not with laws, but with compassion and courage. The Dragon King appeared briefly, landing beside him. Its massive head lowered and its eyes met Nolan's. In that silent moment, Nolan understood the unspoken message. Humans, when guided by heart and bravery, were worthy allies and respected beings in the universe. Nolan's life had changed forever, but so had the colony. Laws could be rewritten, rules could be rethought, and fear could be replaced with respect. All because a single human nurse chose to save a life. He held Ember close, whispering, "We did more than survive, little one. We changed the world." Ember chirped in agreement, flapping its wings proudly. Nolan smiled, knowing that the story of that small act of courage would echo through the ages. Humanity had proven its worth, not through conquest or power but through heart, mercy and the courage to stand for what was right. And that, Nolan realized, was the truest legacy of all.